Let's drop the incense and wheel the gurney in. Buddhism versus neuroscience isn't East versus West. It's claims versus instruments. The lab does not care for your lineage, your robes, or your YouTube aura. It cares whether something shows up in behavior under time pressure, in physiology under noise, in signals that repeat when the props are removed. That offends both camps. Mystics protest that fMRI can't catch emptiness. Reductionists smirk that a feeling of unity is an oxygen issue with better PR. Both are cowards in different robes. A serious practitioner should want the lab because lies die there. A serious scientist should want the Dharma because it proposes testable alterations of latency, reactivity, bias, and compassion at human scale. What survives the lab? Not your rapture story, not your aura photo. What survives is timing. Half a second between stimulus and spin. Milliseconds shaved off startle. Spikes softened in conflict probes. Speech cleaned when provoked. The lab can't image emptiness, but it can count fewer contracts signed with anger when the bait lands. It can count repair speed after harm. It can watch a default mode network quiet without collapse. A salience network stop screaming. A body stop squeezing the throat when nothing is wrong. That's not exotic. That's a nervous system made trustworthy. The lab also kills delusions you loved. Breath manipulation masquerades as mysticism. Respiration artifacts are merciless on EEG. Energy that vanishes when you blind the session. Placebo by candlelight. Personality cults that talk ethics but crater on deception tasks. Hello, external validity. If your awakening can't beat a Stroop, a go, no-go, a moral choice under time cost, or a public audit scenario, it was mood lighting. Neuroscience isn't pure either. It fetishizes pictures and neglects protocol hygiene. Underpowered samples, garden of forking paths stats, confounds like caffeine, sleep, respirations, and prior training regimes. Scan worship mistakes, colored maps for truth, while ignoring what the mouth did that week. But when the lab is sober, pre-registered, blinded where possible, behavioral endpoints first, it becomes Dharma's mean friend. It asks, does this training reduce harm beyond your mirror? Do strangers benefit? Can we see it when you don't know you're being watched? So Buddhism versus neuroscience is the wrong fight. The right one is marketing versus measurement. Spirituality that cannot survive measurement belongs to merch. Neuroscience that cannot tolerate phenomena bigger than its current tools belongs to tenure, not truth. The middle is rude and adult. Treat the mind like a system you can recompile, and the lab like a room where stories go to confess. If that makes your favorite slogans nervous, good. Truth doesn't need a filter. It needs a ledger. The lab is not built to certify metaphysics. It is built to discriminate mechanics. It can't answer, is nirvana real? But it can hammer, does this training reliably produce trait-level reductions in reactivity and bias? Here's the short list that survives. Attention stability, variance drop in sustained tasks, conflict monitoring, cleaner error-related signals paired with less punitive rumination, affect tone, faster return to baseline after provocation, pro-social spillover, costly helping when no applause is available, and speech hygiene, fewer hostile markers under pressure. These are boring on purpose. They travel across cultures and resist cosplay, what dies under instrumentation, peak state inflation. The rapture your journal married becomes respiration-driven arousal when capnography is added. Self-report halos, the kind that swell around gurus, deflate under blinding and deception probes. mystical experience questionnaires, flattened categories, good labs now triangulate with behavioral payoffs, anonymous generosity, third-party ratings, conflict outcomes. If a bliss episode doesn't make your Tuesday kinder, it becomes an anecdote, not evidence. Scan porn is another corpse. A bright blob doesn't equal meaning. fMRI measures blood flow noise filtered into narratives. Without task rigor, the story writes itself. Reliable findings are humbler. Default mode network. Coupling can shift. Insular interoception can get clearer. Prefrontal control may quiet in well-trained subjects without performance loss, suggesting regulation is handed off to lower-cost processes. That's a mouthful, not a poster, and it won't sell crystals. It survives because it predicts behavior you can count. The lab also calls Dharma's bluff on universality. Not all meditation is the same. Different protocols produce opposite effects. Absorption, heavy. You may get narrow brilliance and social weirdness, open monitoring. You may get better conflict repair at the cost of peak fireworks. Mindfulness as corporate anesthesia will produce compliance, not freedom. The lab will dutifully report reduced complaint emails, and HR will call it a win. Science doesn't do ethics, you do. What the lab can't see yet, ontology. It can't certify emptiness or pronounce on non-duality without collapsing them into process models, predictive coding, precision weighting, self-model attenuation. That's fine. If the model reduces harm and increases reliability, Dharma can nod. If the model reduces humans to blips that justify cruelty, Dharma can say no. The point isn't whose cosmology wins. It's whether suffering loses when the dust settles. Neuroscience's best gamble right now is predictive processing, the brain as a guessing engine, minimizing error between expected and incoming signals. In that frame, the self is a control fantasy, a layered model that coordinates perception and action by assigning precision, confidence to predictions. Buddhism says a parallel obscenity. Self is constructed, sticky, and defended by ignorance. Look closely and you'll find process without owner. Different languages, same insult to vanity. When practice reports self-thinning, labs can sometimes see correlates, de-weighting of self-referential processing, altered interoceptive inferences, less chatter in autobiographical loops without cognitive collapse. That last clause is the adult part. Plenty of things break the self: trauma, drugs, hypoxia. Dharma's claim is ruder. The self model can relax on purpose while competence stays or rises. If your emptiness makes you useless, you found a hole, not a freedom. Predictive brains also explain the Dharma's obsession with clinging. Suffering spikes when the system overassigns precision to priors, treats predictions as law, and fights data. Non-clinging looks like precision right-sizing, letting the world update models without panic. That's not apathy, it's flexibility. Emptiness in this frame isn't nothing exists. It's nothing is what your labels pretend. Everything is conditions meeting revisable. The lab can't crown the metaphysics, but it can measure updatability. Do trained subjects revise faster with less heat? Where the marriage gets ugly, romantic illusions that neuroscience loves, like turning non-duality into a dose of ego death and selling it as enlightenment. Acute boundary loss is cheap, psychedelic seizures, hyperventilation. Buddhism's insult is that liberation isn't just state collapse. It's trait competence in not being owned by state. The lab should stop fetishizing peak reports and track long horizon outputs, harm reduction that survives stress, not weekend awe. And Buddhism must drop its contempt for models. A map isn't an enemy, it's a lever if you don't worship it. Predictive accounts won't capture taste, what pre-conceptual contact feels like, but they may describe why certain trainings alter error dynamics and conflict style. When a model predicts that reweighting interoception will change rumination, and it does, Dharma gains an ally against mystification. When a model is used to justify numbing or coercion, Dharma keeps the knife. The rule is brutal and simple. No self that preserves the neighbor wins. Self-models that excuse harm lose. Anyone can buy a weekend of awe. Labs can even amplify it. Dark rooms, headphones, guided suggestions, psychedelics, VR, states spike, headlines bloom, culture eats the picture. Then Tuesday arrives and the metrics that matter shuffle in with coffee. Did deception drop? Did repair speed rise? Did third-party observers who aren't in your Sangha or your subreddit notice you leak less harm? If not, the state was theatre with better acoustics. Trait change is the graveyard of hype. It is also where Dharma claims its existence. Traits are expensive because everything conspires to keep you recognizable. Your job wants the same you, your partner expects the same fights, your algorithms serve the same bait. To alter trait is to alter contracts, verbal, social, neural. The lab can help by setting long baselines, decoy measures, and adversarial audits. Do subjects stay kinder when anonymity is guaranteed? Do they keep promises when the social cost changes? Do they protect outgroup targets without applause? You can't MRI that, you measure it the old way, with inconvenience and time. This is where many neurodharma papers wilt. Short interventions, tidy p-values, no follow-up at 6 months, no collateral reports from people who endure the subject's email tone. Buddhism, when it isn't selling cushions, insists on years. Not because truth likes delay, but because systems resist change and habits litigate. The vow to reduce harm must outlast novelty and survive boredom. There's also the counterfeit trait, suppression that looks like equanimity, compliance that reads as compassion, dissociation that scans as reduced reactivity. Good labs include behavioral traps to force the mask to crack, surprise unfairness, ego threat, ambiguous loss. If the calm is real, it will protect the neighbor under these loads. If it's freeze, it will leak later, in bedrooms and budget meetings. So what survives the lab? A small set of unglamorous deltas, faster de-escalation, cleaner speech under heat, reduced punitive bias, cheaper return to baseline, greater updatability, wider circle of practical concern. None of this belongs on a poster. All of it saves lives at dull scale. Neuroscience can count these. Buddhism can insist on them. Between them, the romance dies and the work gets done. Every field has a wardrobe department. In contemplative science, it's candles, white coats, and the rumor that the device is sacred. Expectancy is not a side note. It's a co-author. Tell people this method unlocks compassion, and you've already dosed them. Cue words, music, authority, and the choreography of consent will drag results upward long before any specific mechanism earns its keep. That doesn't mean the training does nothing. It means the container speaks loudly. Rituals always have. The temple has a smell. The scanner does too. Each announces something meaningful begins. Bodies comply. The trouble starts when either camp pretends to be immune. Spiritual marketers call expectancy blessing. Researchers call it nuisance variance. Both are evasions. Expectancy is human social physics. We mirror, we infer, we try to please, we hate to disappoint. Demand characteristics turn volunteers into actors who intuit the plot. Allegiance effects, what the lab subconsciously wants, bend analysis decisions. Warm experimenters pull warmer outcomes. Cold rooms shorten patience. Headlines prefer brain rewired to participants believed. Active controls shrink the theatre, but even sham meditation is a ritual with its own charisma. Swap Sanskrit for neutral English and you've already performed an exorcism. That fact alone can move measures. Deception paradigms help until they collapse into ethics complaints. And the scanner, with its varnish of futurism, is not neutral. The machine is a modern altar. People behave differently on altars. So what survives the costume? Effects that outlast theatre, travel across hostile rooms, and invert when the story is reversed. If a sweet script and a stern script produce the same behavioral deltas, maybe you have mechanics. If results die when the charismatic PI goes on sabbatical, you had allegiance. If outcomes persist after the lab tells a deflating story, your effect is sturdier than belief. Conversely, if the magnitude swings with framing, color, and voice, you have a phenomenon that belongs to ritual first, method second. That is not an insult, it is a map. Much of contemplative change rides on meaning making, and meaning is a communal technology long before it is a neural one. Reductionists get itchy here. So it's placebo. Placebo is not nothing. It's the organizing power of expectation, top-down predictions, modulating perception, nociception, inflammation, even motor output. To call something just placebo is to confess you don't understand prediction. The Dharma gets itchy too. If a lot of your miracles vanish when you blind the ceremony, you don't have miracles. You have beautiful stagecraft. Keep the beauty, admit it's stagecraft, and stop selling it as physics. Where this lands, not in sneering, but in hierarchy. Put specific mechanisms under the line. Put ritual expectancy above it. Watch the interaction. Some trainings will be mostly costume, some mostly mechanics. Most will be braids. The lab's job is to tease strands apart without pretending it doesn't braid. The Dharma's job is to stop hiding behind incense when the braid frays under light. Pain is not a simple siren, it's an inference about threat. The system guesses from tissue signals, memory, context, and mood, then assigns precision to its guess. Buddhism arrives with a bullying claim. Suffering is not just intensity, it's grip, the contract we sign with the signal. Labs approach with probes, capsaicin, heat plates, cold pressor, unfairness paradigms. What keeps surviving across protocols is a boring distinction that ruins marketing, intensity versus unpleasantness. Certain trainings leave intensity steady while unpleasantness drops. Others budge both. Some flip the trade, numbness that backfires later. Predictive accounts make sense of this. If attention is the budget that buys precision, and if attention can be taught to reassign that budget, the system will downweight the "this is bad" and "about me" component even when the raw input is unlovely. That isn't magic, it's accounting. Interoceptive signals still tick. The story that wraps them softens, shortens, loses the prosecutorial tone. Insular and singular signals shift in patterns that look less like alarm and more like clearance. Replace or with grammar and you get a sentence science can pass. But the same math warns against triumphalism. Underreaction can be pathology. The person who ignores damage because they trained aversion out of awareness is not free. They are miscalibrated. The lab's job is to provoke ambiguous pain where social stakes matter, where unfairness contaminates sensation, where dignity and threat mix, and see whether the change preserves discernment while reducing suffering theatre. The Dharma's claim is mature only if the subject becomes more protective of bodies, not less, and less owned by pain's narrative, not blind to danger. There's also the confound called attention as analgesic. Narrow absorption will simply occlude signals, so will dissociation. That may look heroic on a graph. It ends badly in a clinic and at home. Open monitoring, by contrast, can keep the channel wide while reframing prediction. Pleasant for nobody, but honest. The scanner won't adjudicate the ethics. Behavioral spillovers will. If the person treats other people's pain with greater sensitivity after training, you likely altered narrative glue. If they treat it with chill indifference, you likely trained freeze and called it equanimity. So what survives the lab so far? A cautious sentence. Certain contemplative regimes appear to reassign precision away from alarm appraisal without deleting signal. This reduces reported unpleasantness and sometimes improves choices under stress. The sentence is plain on purpose. Plain is how you keep from lying to people who are actually hurting. Compassion interventions publish well. Who dislikes kindness? But the lab has a politeness problem. It often measures niceness, agreeable affect, softened tone, self-descriptions, then baptizes it as compassion. Organizations adore this because nice people file fewer complaints. Yet, compassion in the wild is expensive and sometimes noisy. It contradicts leaders, leaks status, protects unpopular bodies, and refuses to outsource harm to procedure. In metrics, that looks like whistleblowing, boundary setting, resource reallocation, risk. The smile count may go down while justice goes up. Compliance can wear a compassion mask. A subject sits straighter, speaks softer, nods more, defers. Is harm lower? Or has the person learned to dampen conflict signals to please the evaluator? Many protocols won't know because they rarely include adversarial social tests where kindness costs face, time, or money with no reciprocity. They won't include third-party beneficiaries or out-group targets. They'll confuse reduced hostility with increased care, ignoring the middle option, trained fawning. Buddhism isn't off the hook. Communities love the optics of serenity and will quietly select for performers who generate low-maintenance rooms. Couple this with rhetoric about compassion, and you get an obedient Sangha held together by avoidance. Neuroscience with shallow endpoints will clap. Neuroscience with better anthropology will ask who is safer because of the training, not just who is sweeter in lab. So what would differentiate compassion from compliance conceptually, not as a how-to, but as a spine? Costs that land outside the mirror, choices that benefit the least flattering recipient, protection that activates against one's in-group when necessary, willingness to accept friction and loss to prevent harm. These are not moods, they are trade-offs. You don't need a scanner to see them, you need a ledger and witnesses. A scanner can still help by showing whether threat systems down-regulate after hard choices are made, not before, whether rumination drops without dissociation, whether self-referential loops don't hog bandwidth when another person's survival is at stake. If contemplative science keeps rewarding pleasant to manage as compassion, It will produce gilded quiet, not refuge. If Buddhist institutions keep rewarding non-disruptive as awake, they will export compliance and call it loving kindness. The lab can ruin that romance by changing what counts. The Dharma can ruin it by refusing to certify pleasant as good. Between them, kindness might become measurable without being domesticated. The standoff is theatrical. Buddhists guard mystique. Neuroscientists guard prestige. Meanwhile, suffering does its slow arithmetic in bedrooms, ERS, kitchens, and budget meetings. A truce that helps no one. Photographs of halos next to heat maps of blood. If the point is fewer casualties, each camp must bury a pet. Buddhism must bury peak state marketing, the trade in goosebumps that won't change a Tuesday, bury lineage opacity where robes hide ledgers and transmission outranks governance, bury measurement phobia, the superstition that counting profanes the sacred, bury aesthetic minimalism that erases labor and calls the erasure enlightenment, keep vows, keep forms, keep the knife for delusion, especially your own. Neuroscience must bury scan worship, the pageantry that mistakes a color map for a cause, bury short horizon interventions that cannot outlive novelty, bury instrumental cynicism that reduces meaning to noise and then sells the reduction as courage, bury colonial habits that loot concepts, emptiness, compassion, and strip them of history until they flatter a grant. Keep rigor, keep skepticism, keep the capacity to say, we don't know yet, without mocking what won't fit this month's model. Shared ground isn't sentimental. It's a ledger both can sign. Behavior under load, speech under heat, bias under anonymity, protection of strangers when nobody's watching, repair speeds, governance that survives scandal, budgets that match mouths. If a teaching can't move those needles, stop calling it liberation. If an experiment won't measure those needles, stop calling it relevant. The lab can't image nirvana. The Sangha can't chant p-values. They can agree on harms that should go down and capacities that should go up, not because philosophy demands it, but because bodies do. Suffering is parochial. It happens to someone and begs this room to behave. Any story that forgets that becomes art for the already comfortable. Any science that forgets that becomes toys for tenure. So what survives the lab? Whatever refuses flattery travels across rituals and rooms and leaves neighbors safer when the equipment is off and the incense is cold. That isn't a compromise. It's the only standard that deserves the word dharma, and the only one a serious science should envy. Everything else is costume.